Welcome to Podcast Movement Evolutions 2024.
I have to start with this. My wife just texted me like 30 seconds ago. She texted me, "You are handsome and brilliant and 12 feet tall, and I'm so proud of what you and Brian have built." I know. Like, I just totally won the wife lottery. So, yeah, I did. Like, that was just so awesome. So I have been doing whatever this is for 30 years this year. I started my media career in 1994, believe it or not. And I know what you're all thinking, how is it you only look 21, Tom? And it's a combination of my incredible passion and enthusiasm for spoken word audio, and an airplane pillow that I keep stuffed with cocaine. They never check that. They never check that at the airport. We have a brand new study coming out. It's coming out next week, and it's called the Ad Bargain. And I'm going to start with a couple of sneak preview slides from that. And then I'm going to just kind of walk you through, I think, kind of a victory lap for those of us who are in the business of selling things for our podcast. And then I'm going to close with something I think that will be more applicable to everyone, because we're not all in the advertising business, I know. I happen to be very focused in my day job on trying to build an economy for podcasting so that people can say, I have a career in podcasting. That's a very, very important thing to me. And so that doesn't happen without advertising. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a QR code so that you can download this deck and also sign up for the Ad Bargain next week. But I wanted to equip you with this, because this deck, I think, by itself is a great thing to stick in your sales kit. It's a great answer to a lot of questions that you might get. And I've called this the safest bet, because in the 30 years that I have done media research, I've researched everything. I have researched ads above urinals. I've researched ads in subways. I've researched the restaurant and the transit, right? I've researched radio, television, print, digital, kiosks, you name it. If you can slap an ad on it, I have researched it. And podcasting is the most effective I have ever worked on. By far. Right? By far. There is a special relationship there, and I want to talk about that. And it really comes through I'm going to start with some new slides from the Ad Bargain. This is a question that we asked a sample of over 2,000 Americans in the Ad Bargain about all of the platforms that they use. So each of these answers are by the users of that platform. I'm more willing to consider products and services after I learn about them on this media. And podcasting came at the very top of this list. It's not something that I could have predicted. I sort of predicted. I've seen some numbers, right, in my day. But you never know how it's going to turn out. And this is, in fact, how it turned out. And it's a genuine sentiment, I think. And there are a couple of reasons for that. We also narrowed the focus. Last year, we did a study called The Medium Moves the Message, which was a comparative look at radio, television, and podcasting. This year, we wanted to focus a little bit on a couple of other video channels. So a lot of the data that we collected in the Ad Bargain looks at YouTube and also CTV, streaming TV, ad-supported streaming TV, and so on. How likely are you to look for more information about a product or service you see or hear advertised on podcasts, YouTube, streaming TV? I mean, these are all pretty good numbers, but podcasting takes the lead here at 65%, right? So it's an extraordinarily effective vehicle to get people to inquire about a brand or service, and also to recommend a product or service that they've heard about on podcasting. Again, podcasts here statistically just about tied with YouTube, 59%, 58%, and then streaming TV down at 51%. So people do respond to ads. And then, of course, the real money question here, how likely are you to purchase a product or service that you see or hear advertised on that? And podcasting is substantially in the lead, especially over streaming TV. And by the way, it's not just that podcasting is number one on all of these slides. That 53% is a majority of podcast listeners saying that an ad worked on them. And that's not something that people are willing to admit necessarily, right? That, oh, actually advertising worked on me and I bought something, right? But that is in fact what over half of podcast listeners are saying here. And there are some reasons for that. The first reason, I think, is that podcasting, what we all do in this room, is very well regarded by consumers. Despite the efforts of Only Murders in the Building and some SNL skits to make us all look like we're desperate dorks, we are actually well respected by the American public. This is some data that is from the podcast landscape, which we put out last year, which again was another survey of over 2,000 Americans. 95% were familiar with the term podcast, and then we gave them some adjectives to describe podcasting, and wouldn't you know it, but all the positive ones surfaced to the top. You don't get anything negative until you get down to the bottom of the left column, not for people like me, which that's possible. Too many choices, 11%. And then all the, the nasty stuff is all sort of at the right in single digits. But people generally, this is the entire population here, feel that podcasts are entertaining and interesting and informative and a good pastime. Not only are podcasts well regarded, but you people are well regarded. What we do as a job is well regarded. Think about podcasters and podcasting as a job. And again, you see lots and lots of positive adjectives at the top. You don't see things like frivolous and unimportant until very far down at the bottom. One of my favorite things about this graph is that 1 in 5 say it's something I'd like to do. 1 in 5 Americans say that it's something that they would like to do, right? That's pretty good. That means we're doing a good job, I think, singing the song of podcasting to certainly the American public and the world. Another reason besides that positive regard, and this is also from the ad bargain, which we'll release next week, is that people draw a direct line between the ads and the support to the creation of the content that they love. It may in fact be the strongest line in any media platform that people draw, that the ads for products and services that people hear about on podcasts are in fact directly supporting a creator and directly making things happen, right? And so I think that also adds to that halo effect and that kind of bond that the audience feels with the creator. And by the way, that bond does not only extend to host-read advertising. Again, something I wanted you to have in this deck, it's kind of a victory lap for podcasts, is that host-read ads do really perform the best. As my friend Marshall Williams says, they're the beachfront property of podcasting. But the effect extends to any well-executed podcast ad. We did a study when I first joined Brian at Sounds Profitable called After These Messages, and we took a segment of a podcast, this was Jordan Harbinger's show, with an interview with Matthew McConaughey. We knew it would be a fairly well-received piece of content because we were playing it cold for a sample of 1,000 people. So they heard this piece of a podcast, and in the middle of it, we put 3 different executions of an Athletic Greens ad. We put a live read by Jordan, we put a scripted read by Jordan, and then we used that same script and gave it to Ashley Hamer, whose read really fit the mood of the show, right? And the results of all of this, when we looked at certain things like overall appeal, fit with the show, interest in learning more, likelihood to purchase, is that yes, the host-read ad did the best, but the announcer read from Ashley did really, really good, right? It did extraordinarily well, and you see that announcer read. The column on the right are with people that are fans of Jordan's show. We had plenty of them in that sample, and for that, you see the announcer read actually even did a little bit better in some cases. So as long as the ad is well executed, you can't get away with crappy ads, but if the ad is well executed, fits the mood of the show, people are going to respond to it almost as well as they respond to a host-read ad. And that's really important, again, for our economy, for our business. Even with branded podcasts are actually particularly effective. Also from the podcast landscape, we asked people 4 different types of podcast, how likely would you be to listen? And it's really remarkable to me that 41% on the right, almost as high as a podcast hosted by a favorite celebrity, right, say that they would be interested in listening to a podcast about a favorite brand or product. And I'm sure you all have favorite brands, favorite products that you rave about, that you're ambassadors for, that you're evangelists for. And you would be interested in hearing that, right? And by the way, that's 41% of the American public at large. That's about 106 million Americans, many of whom would fit in this room. It's in fact an extraordinarily effective way to reach people who are fans of products and services with a branded podcast. And when you ask these brand fans, the people who say that they would be likely to listen to a show about a favorite product or service, those brand fans are incredibly positive about the fact that a company is involved with a show. When you learn it's produced by a company that offers products or services that you care about, does a company's involvement make you more or less likely to listen to it? A couple of things to note here. Yes, the brand fans are more positive. About half say that they're more likely. But listeners in general, they're not negative about it. The rejection is very, very small. There's almost no rejection there. So people are passionate. People are passionate about brands that serve and support the creators of the content that they are interested in. Last year, I mentioned we put out a study called The Media Moves a Message that shows that podcasting significantly outperforms a couple of other traditional media platforms, radio and television, which we chose because they're all in the same game. They're all in the spot advertising, spot broadcast advertising kind of game, right? They're all basically selling 30 to 60-second ads about things. And we took the top 5 brands in radio, the top 5 brands in television, and the top 5 brands in podcasting, all by share of voice from 2022. And we asked a series of brand lift, brand fit, sort of basic brand metrics about them all. And we compared how non-TV viewers versus heavy TV viewers perceived the top 5 brands in TV. And we did the same for radio, and we did the same for podcasting. What we saw in television, this is very indicative of all 5 brands, is that television absolutely raises awareness. You see that on the left, the gap between non-TV viewers and heavy TV viewers. That's a campaign that absolutely did raise awareness of Progressive if you didn't know them already, right? So that definitely worked. But you do see a bit of a backlash as you go further down the funnel to taking action. Sometimes people get tired of hearing Progressive ads, right? And that backlash, I think, you absolutely see here with the TV viewers. So that's fairly indicative of the television brands we tested. Radio brands we tested, ZipRecruiter, fairly new-ish to AM/FM at the time that we did this. Incredible rise in awareness, right? Very effective in awareness, effective in raising favorability. Then it kind of evens out for things like consideration and taking action. And the third brand that I'll show you was one of the top 5 advertisers for podcasting, and that was Shopify. Yes, there was a rise in awareness, but look at the gap here between non-podcast listeners and heavy podcast listeners on favorability, consideration, taking action. These were extraordinary results. The lower you go into the funnel, the closer you get to the actual purchase of a product, the more effective podcasting gets. And when we average the results of all of these numbers, what we saw was that for increasing favorability, podcasting outperformed television and radio. Television had a 5% positive gap, radio 8% positive difference, podcasts a 14% positive difference for favorability. Consideration, same thing. Television a 4% positive difference, radio 5%, and podcasts 15%. And then finally, for purchase behavior, that's where we really see the strongest differences of all. Television, a 1% difference, radio 6%, and podcast 16%. Now there's all kinds of reasons for that, and I don't care about any of them, honestly, because right now is a great time to buy podcasts. For whatever reason this happens, and yes, I do have theories, I do think about things, it really doesn't matter, because that kind of arbitrage, whether it is arbitrage or not, is entirely possible right now and will be for the foreseeable future. Podcasting is a more effective place for those lower funnel measures, right? Some people are worried about podcasts, that if they advertise on podcasts, that their ad will show up next to questionable content or things that they or somebody might find objectionable. We did a study on that as well called Safe and Sound, right? The thing about podcasts is they are self-selected. You choose to listen to a podcast, you're not going to keep listening to it if it offends you. You're choosing to listen to it. Everybody has different degrees of offense that they take, right? Some advertisers are a little wary about true crime. They don't want to be associated with murder. Now, I think murder is a wonderful thing to be associated with, especially if you're a brand like Tide that gets out stains. Like, you're going to want to wash your clothes, right? So we asked fans of true crime in a study that we did called Safe and Sound, do you like it when a brand supports your favorite true crime podcast? Well, of course they do. There's no disagreement with that. There's just massive agreement with it because, again, they are thankful that a brand is supporting their favorite creators and making these shows that they self-select to listen to possible. They like it when a brand supports their favorite podcast, and they agree that they're more likely to remember a brand if it advertises on their favorite true crime podcast. So whether it's Tide Pods or just flat out weapons, true crime is certainly a safe and wonderful place to advertise, as is comedy, as are some of the most controversial programs in podcasting. We asked about that in this study with some individual shows as well, right? People appreciate that this content that they cannot get anywhere else is being made possible by the products and services that support them. And even customers who pay to avoid ads find podcast ads compelling. This, to me, is kind of bananas. This is from the last study that we put out, which was called Sound You Can See, and it was about the rise of video and podcasting, and certainly the propensity for people to find podcasts on services like YouTube. When we asked this particular sample, these were video podcast consumers, people who said that they had watched at least one video podcast in the last month. Do you subscribe to YouTube Premium? About a quarter said that they did. Why do they subscribe to YouTube Premium? That quarter that do so subscribe to YouTube Premium to get an ad-free YouTube experience, to stop YouTube from interrupting their videos, and to get YouTube music without ads. The top three answers here are all about advertising avoidance. These are people that pay to avoid ads. And when you ask those people, those YouTube Premium customers, how they feel about the ads that they're getting in podcasts, and I'm not talking about the YouTube ads, I'm talking about the native embedded ads that are in the show itself. The top terms here are informative, interesting, relevant, entertaining, right? They're positive here for the top four. And then, some people are just gonna hate ads anyway, but these are people that pay to avoid them, and they're telling us that they like these ones. Like, these ones are actually pretty good, right? That's a pretty remarkable statement. What's your opinion of the ads read by creators and hosts on the podcasts that you consume on YouTube Premium? 87% like or don't mind them. More than a third say they like them. And very few people say that they dislike them, right? So it's an incredibly effective way to reach even people that are difficult to reach because they're paying to avoid ads. So, to me, podcast advertising is a really safe bet, because what are we doing here? We're not in the business of selling ads, and products and brands and services aren't in the business of buying ads. They're in the business of buying attention. And that is what podcasts deliver. Podcasts deliver attention. They deliver a strong bond between the listener and the creators of the show and the brands and products that make those creations possible. Now, next week, again, we're putting out a report called the Ad Bargain. This QR code will give you three things. Number one, a little jolt of joy when you click on it, even though you can't click on it. I'm not that dumb. Number two, it will give you a copy of this deck that I showed you today, The Safest Bet, which again is sort of a victory lap of podcast advertising, a summation of all the work that we have done. And then number three, it will allow you to register for the Ad Bargain, which I hope you do. There will be new stats, some new jokes, and maybe pictures of my dogs, which I always enjoy showing off. Now, in the time that I have left after this withering torrent of slides, I want to share something with you. I mentioned that I've been in sort of the media business for 30 years, doing media research and audience research. I've worked on the Howard Stern Show. I've worked on All Things Considered. I've run the gamut on the shows that I've worked on and done audience research for. And I've spent 19 of those in podcasting, right? This is the start of my 19th year looking at podcasting, trying to do whatever it is I can to help lift this space. And that's really why I joined Brian, because that's both of our goals. That's our mission, to grow this space, to develop it into an economy so that people can make careers and lives out of doing podcasting. Nothing would make me happier than doing that, right? What I encourage you all to do, and make a little pledge with yourself to do this, things can get really divisive in this space. Podcasting started as sort of a band of pirates that were sick of radio, right? That's really how podcasting started. And that kind of pirate mentality, I think, persists even today, and that's a good thing. But let's also remember that we're all rowing the same boat here, right? We are all trying to do our best to grow this space. And so what I would encourage you to do is think about this. 15 years ago, I spoke about podcasts at a thing called Blog World. Now, for you students of history, a weblog or blog was a thing from the early part of the 21st century. And I still remember them. I don't know if you do as well. They really didn't last, did they? I mean, yes, some of us still have blogs, but they kind of got eaten by Medium and Substack and newsletters and things like that. Blogs aren't a thing anymore. And I don't want that to happen to this space. And that's a thing that could happen if we allow ourselves to get too divided, if we allow ourselves to try to chop things up too much. We need to take a cue from improv, adopt a yes and mentality. We're all fighting a great battle here. We're all trying to do the best that we can. And things that I think divide us are not particularly useful right now. There's a sentiment I see all the time: if it doesn't have an RSS feed, it's not a podcast. Let me tell you something. RSS is the most valuable thing that we have. It is absolutely the biggest superpower of podcasting. The ability to set up shop completely on a brand new platform with just a feed. It is amazing. It's amazing, right? But it does not benefit anybody to draw those kinds of lines. Earlier today, the infinite dial numbers came out and showed that podcasting grew. If you could deduct from that the people who are watching video podcasts, getting their podcasts on YouTube, I have 3 degrees. There's an econometrics term for it. They get ensmallified. Ensmallification occurs. They get a lot ensmallified, right? We are growing as a spoken word, audio first, episodic medium, and I don't really care how people get it, and we all need to row in the same direction. It doesn't serve anybody to draw these lines. Cui bono, as my Latin teacher would have said. Who does it benefit? I don't know that it benefits anybody. What I would like you to do when you leave here, and maybe even here, is join something. Join something. If you are an independent podcast creator, join the Podcast Academy. Join the Podcast Academy. I'll give you a code, join24. It gets you, I don't know, a lot off, right? It's designed to celebrate excellence, and we have excellence. If you're doing interviews and you're not regularly listening to people like Alex Bloomberg and Anna Sale and Terry Gross, we have excellence. If you want your podcast to sound better, there's people like Jeff Schmidt and Travis Vengroff and Dallas Taylor doing amazing things with sound design. We have excellence. We can learn. We can get better. I encourage you to join. If you're a company that is serving the interests of podcasting, join us. Join us at Sounds Profitable. We have 175 partner companies now. We just pulled off the first full-day South by Southwest session devoted entirely to podcasts. We just pulled that off, and we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep trying to raise the bar and try to embigify this space as much as we can, right? So that's a thing you can join. If you're an independent podcaster, it can be a lonely time for you. It can be hard when you're constantly looking at your downloads, and maybe they've plateaued or maybe they're not growing. Join other podcasters in your genre. Combine into one feed. To me, that's one of the simplest ways to grow, is to join other podcasters in a single feed, right? If you have a comedy show or a true crime show, find some other like-minded podcasters and make sure that there's a feed that is always filled with your great content. It becomes something you can brand. It becomes something that people can rely upon, right? Just join the thing. Join the thing. And another thing that I think is incredibly important is doing things in your local community. I'm convinced that doing things locally is one of the best ways we can grow podcasting. I remember CB Radio, so they're still around, right? It stood for Citizens Band. Wouldn't it be great if your community had a single RSS feed with all the local podcasters telling the stories, singing the songs of your city in a way that newspapers really aren't funded to do anymore, in a way that local radio stations really don't do anymore, right? Those things are all possible if you join. And I'll leave you with this. Years ago, in the late 20th century, where I am from, there was a thing called videotape, right? And there were 2 different standards of videotape, and they fought constantly. There was Betamax, which was a platform put out by Sony that was not an open platform. It was a closed platform, right? And then there was VHS. VHS was developed, I'm pretty sure, by JVC, but they brought in lots of other partners, brands that we all know and love, like Quasar, right? Is anybody who remember who won that battle? No. Nobody won that battle because we don't watch tape anymore. We watch movies. Remember what you do. Remember why you do it. Don't draw lines where they don't have to exist. Join something. Thank you very much.
When Evolutions 2024 wraps up, that only means the fun has just begun. Because this August, we're bringing you the biggest podcast movement event ever. Join us August 19th through the 22nd for the 11th annual podcast movement, as we do it better than ever in Washington, D.C. So make plans to join us this August for the biggest week in podcasting. It's Podcast Movement 2024. We'll see you there.